Welcome, folks, to this 𝗦𝗣𝗘𝗦𝗘𝗥 talk. We are building an accelerator that we'll put in downtown Boston to accelerate the research and development in medical XR, and we'll also run a boot camp. We have run this talk series. We have about 30 talks that have been recorded, and they all have a common theme, which is the innovator's journey. Today we have the barriers to commercializing VR products in healthcare. We have 𝗦𝗣𝗘𝗦𝗧𝗢𝗥, who is moderating the talk. She is an assistant professor in the Department of Kinesiology at California State University. It's wonderful to have domain experts in the role of moderator to bring out the most of what our expert innovators are here to talk about. She both teaches kinesiology and does research in related fields on balance and mobility and cognitive rehabilitation, and work in Parkinson's. I will let her introduce Eran Orr, and then we'll get started. So thank you for joining us, and we look forward to this this talk.
Thank you, Steve. With this talk, I realized I need to update my LinkedIn, which I never check. So I will get back to it. But I will introduce Eran as best as I can, I hope I can do him justice because he is highly accomplished. He's the founder of the XR.Health and the CEO of XR.Health, Inc. And he's an ex-IF executive officer. He has a BA in business management, government, and politics. And he also has an MBA in the entrepreneurship and innovation. Eran was also in the Air Force and incurred some injuries. So previously, he had to experience a long rehabilitation process himself, and served as an initiator and coordinator of the IAF spinal cord damage prevention program for the aircrew personnel, and has significant experience in the physical therapy prevention industry. Eran believes that the metaverse technology will change the healthcare, and he did not just limit the possibilities of the rehab to spinal cord injury or mobility, but he expanded the use of XR to mental health, cognition, and motor control fields as well. XR.Health is the first VR AR telehealth platform in the world, and it houses these treatment rooms and applications for patients and providers. And these applications are combined with the data portal that utilizes AI, and it can allow for monitoring and managing patients remotely, and enables interactions between the patients and the healthcare providers. They have treated over 500,000 patients. And most strikingly, as I think it's very rare in the field as of now because of the challenges to get there, the XR.Health VR AR telehealth platform is ISO certified, FDA certified, and HIPAA compliant. So that's huge. It's not easy to get there. And today, actually, we are going to hear from Eran about the 4 major barriers to incorporate these innovative technology in the U.S. healthcare system. These being the regulatory, reimbursement, physician adoption, and patient adoption. So with that, I will leave the mic to Eran. Thank you.
Thank you for this kind introduction. And hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with all the VR AR in healthcare believers. I'll start by shortly introducing myself, and then I'll run you through a short presentation and some videos, so all of you will have better context of what are we doing here. And then again, hopefully we'll have an interesting conversation about how to commercialize VR and AR in the healthcare system. So I'll start by introducing myself. As I mentioned previously, I'm a former F-16 pilot in the Israeli Air Force, and about 8 years ago, I was diagnosed as suffering from whiplash injury due to the active flight and the G-forces. And during my own rehab, the idea came about to combine a virtual reality in rehab. We were one of the first companies, as far as I know, that registered VR application on the FDA records. And today we believe that the potential of this technology is a lot broader than just physical therapy. I'll start with a small or short video just to show you how the platform looks like, so you'll get a better sense of how we are operating. On the left side, you can see a patient inside a virtual treatment room. On the right side, you can see a clinician monitoring, controlling everything inside that virtual treatment room. While the patient is inside that virtual treatment room, we are controlling, the clinician is controlling everything, and we are monitoring a lot of data, in this case, physical therapy type of data, smoothness, peak velocity, efficiency, eye tracking. The clinician have the ability to transport the patient to different types of treatment rooms, cognitive treatment rooms, stress and anxiety, pain management treatment rooms, and at the end of the session, the clinician and the patient have full analytics. So both the patient can see their outcomes and the clinician can see their outcomes. So as I mentioned, we have 8 applications, FDA Class 2 under ISD product code. We also have CE mark, and all the platform is HIPAA compliant with all the certification needed. We treated over 5,000 patients, completed over 200,000 VR treatments to date. One of them, I think for us at least, the biggest advantage that we are seeing is very, very high patient adherence and patient satisfaction scores, almost double than what you see in the brick and mortar or outpatient clinics. And we can talk about it later on, how it's making a big effect. We have 2 business models. One is our legacy business, where we are selling the technology to rehab centers and hospitals. But I think what's unique in what we're doing is that 2.5 years ago, because, by the way, we faced a lot of difficulties of incorporating this technology into the healthcare system, we decided that we'll be the provider also. So we launched XR.Health virtual clinics across the US, and we now have clinics in all the big states in the US and in Australia, where we are basically treating patients remotely using virtual reality. We are now conducting a VR treatment every 7 minutes on average, and a lot of multiple patents around the platform. It's a C Corp, US based. We have an R&D center back in Israel and those virtual clinics. And again, as I mentioned, we are planning to expand to other locations later on. I think that all of you are aware that the main problem in existing physical therapy and occupational therapy market is the lack of accessibility, low adherence, very, very hard, almost impossible to evaluate patient progress. And the patient experience is relatively bad. And we believe that all of that can be addressed by using virtual reality technology. I'll start with accessibility. I think it's relatively clear. Location is meaningless. There's no, once you're putting a VR headset on, you are stepping into those virtual reality treatment rooms, and there's no, it doesn't matter where you are. You can be, back home, the clinician can be wherever they want to be, and we can basically treat patients in those same virtual treatment rooms from anywhere and no matter where the patient is. Once you're putting the VR headset on, the patient is basically entering a computer-generated environment where it's a closed-loop system. That means that we can manipulate the virtual reality environment and then measure how the patient is reacting to those changes. And by doing so, adjust the entire virtual treatment room which you cannot do in a brick and mortar settings. It's very hard to create that closed loop system. And that's why data and AI are, in our view, highly, highly important. And it's the same type of measurements every time you're putting the VR headset on. So you can get a consistency of how you are actually measuring the patient progress, and then clinician can intervene if progress is not the way that they expected. One of the most powerful thing about VR is that the fact you can, as I like to call it, you can hijack the brain to treat the body. And in the video that you saw, the patient actually believe that they are in a circus. They actually believe that they are somewhere else, and that improves dramatically the patient experience. That in return improved dramatically the patient adherence or compliance, which it's relatively clear that if you have patients that are engaged in their recovery and rehab, they will get better. And I think for that matter, VR is a very powerful tool. We have patients telling us they're reaching out to the VR headset instead of taking pain medication, instead of taking anxiety meds. And I think it's because patients truly feel that allows them to alleviate the discomfort and the pain and to engage better with their recovery. Just of how we are actually, how this virtual clinic operates and how that looks like. So patient sign up on our website. One of our clinicians, certified physical therapists and occupational therapists, will do a video call, a Zoom call, to make sure that they are suitable to use virtual reality. They don't have any contraindication. And again, it's safe for them to use virtual reality. Assuming that's the case, we are shipping them a headset pre-installed only with those virtual treatment room and those medical applications. No gaming, no entertainment. And one of the things that we saw early on, and I'll talk about it in greater detail later in the Q&A probably, I think content is not the biggest problem today in our industry. The main problem is how do you get someone to use a headset in an easy to digest way. People that are not gamers, they want to use it to improve their health. And the current systems are highly gaming focused, and we spend a lot of time and money to make sure that someone without any type of technology experience can use the headset. Most of our patients, by the way, are seniors over 65. So to go back to the process, we are shipping headsets pre-installed with those medical software to the patients. The patients are getting the headset, downloading a mobile app that guides them how to use the VR for the first time. And then they're conducting a virtual reality treatment, usually twice a week. In between, they can access the headset by themselves under the supervision of the clinician, and the clinicians are monitoring them remotely. And maybe the most important thing that I think we were able to secure is that the reimbursement models, by combining different type of CPT codes, not unique to XR.Health, by the way, if it's not clear, the patient economic model is exactly like a brick and mortar type of clinic, and then we can actually compete over outcomes and not just try to force our way to convince people to pay differently than what they will pay in brick and mortar settings. On the left side, you can see the components of the different type of the platform. If it's the telehealth kit, we have, by the way, partnership with multiple VR manufacturers, those medical applications, the clinician interface, and the patient mobile app. And as I mentioned, all the regulation in place and the data components and all the certification in place. I want to show you a 1-minute video of patient testimonials. I think it's important to see the type of patient that we are treating. All of that, by the way, you can see all the patient testimonials on Google reviews and on Trustpilot reviews. We basically started to collect those in a more ordinary fashion a few months ago, and I think you'll be surprised, how people see VR as such an effective tool for their recovery.
When you think of the possibilities that a space can have, organizing and design really are hand in hand, which is why
I've had chronic back pain. I've had neck pain.
I broke my shoulder the previous summer.
I have Parkinson's disease.
I have stage 4 cancer. With that came a lot of back pain. I have tumors on my back.
I got in a major truck accident with UPS, went into shock, mini strokes.
You have to get up, get in the car, you have to go to the office, you have to wait in the waiting room, you have to get your... This was so much easier to do because you just sign on to your virtual session, put on your headset, and you're good to go.
My memory was improving and I was able to go into a room and remember why I was there.
Much better range of motion with my shoulder, lowering my stress.
It was like my private therapy. It was phenomenal.
But some of the things that I couldn't do, such as playing my guitar, which I've loved to do for many, many years, I can now do in a limited fashion.
I started and it worked. It worked far better than I expected.
Now I can tie my shoes. You may think that's nothing. It's awesome.
And I'm actually golfing, and I never thought I would ever be able to swing a golf club again.
It's not based on taking medicine to dull the pain. It's really using your own mind.
I felt more like I was playing a game.
Telemed is the future of a lot of medicine that can be handled without having to go to an office, and it works.
So that's again 10 minutes of high-level overview. I'll just say that we are about to publish multiple papers analyzing real-world evidence and some clinical evidence that we are seeing from the clinic and from the platform. And with that, I think I can hand it off back to Tumay. I see that we already have questions, but I'll let you take the lead from this point on.
Thank you, Eran. This is really amazing to see. I do have a couple questions, but I see some questions are populating in the Q&A. And just as a reminder for everyone, there is a button at the bottom of your screen with Q&A. So if you could plug in your questions there, I will take them as they come in the given order. So I just wanted to ask you a couple of things. One is that I noticed that majority of the time when we are working on a research study, that's the first thing that comes in mind with the IRB is that how safe it is, how are you going to be training the participants. So I see that the clinicians or the healthcare professionals are able to remotely monitor the patients every time they use, and they also remotely can run the software for them. So that answers a lot of those concerns. But what if the patients want to do extra sessions? They say, it would be great if I can just maybe do this more than twice a week as it was prescribed. Is there any room for them to be able to do additional sessions on their own?
First of all, the short answer is yes. The long answer is we believe this technology is most effective when it's in a combination with a certified clinician on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And the clinician have full authority to decide based on their knowledge and expertise how the patient should use the VR headset. And everything needs to go through an approval of the clinician. And as I mentioned, we have two types of modalities in the platform. One is synchronized, like real-time controlling and modifying, and the other one is the homework that usually in the current market or the current standard is you're giving a piece of paper, right? So we are using everything inside the VR. Now, if the patient wants to do extra homework, the right way to do it is to talk to their clinician. Then the clinician will decide if there's there is a disadvantage of doing too much homework, exactly like too little, right? It all need to be according to what the clinician think is right, and then make sure that the system supports the needs.
Of course. And then the second one is a bit more specific. So these are mainly designed for in-home use for the patients. Do you have anything more elaborate for example, to use in PT clinics or research labs where you can utilize equipments like instrumented treadmill, for example?
So it's a deeper question than that, because no, I'll explain why. Because when we started, again, the first application was for cervical spine, like whiplash patient. That's how we got started. And from that point, we expanded to other body parts, and from physical therapy, we expanded to occupational therapy, and from occupational therapy, we are now expanding to, again, as you saw, on pain management, stress and anxiety. We have ASD kids back in Australia. We have seniors here in the US. We even published a paper 2 weeks ago with Harvard Medical School of how it's so effective in the OR during an operation, and it can replace or reduce sedation. I think the challenge that we're trying to solve is, and I think that's also obviously the potential, and that's why I'm very excited about this technology. It's like the amount of application that you can create using this technology that will benefit the patient, it's just mind-blowing. And to go back to the conversation, the topic of this conversation, I think our problem today as an industry is not even the research, it's not the outcomes, it's not the validity of how effective this technology can be for patients. The question is how do you commercialize it? How do you get it into the hands of more clinicians, more patients? How do you get someone to pay for it so it would make sense economically for anyone? How do you solve the regulatory barriers? And as I'm telling my teammates, our job now is to deal with all the non-sexy stuff, the day-to-day activity that you need to take in order to implement this technology in a large scale, until it get to a point that it's a common knowledge that this is a valid modality of care. So that's why I said it was a different maybe answer to what you asked, but it just, again, there is no technology barrier today for anything, to combine different sensors, to create different environments. That's not the challenge. The challenge is the commercialization of the technology.
Right, thank you. So I will start taking questions from the Q&A. Samuel asks, what kind of virtual environments did your patients found most pleasing?
That's a good question. I think, again, what we are seeing is that it's not one size fits all. Some people, I'll just give you an example, very concrete example. Some people, when you want to create, you would think that if you want to calm someone down, you would create those pleasant environment, meditative type of environment, right? And like that's like some patient, actually that drives them nuts. And they want to be very active, high intense for a short period of time, and that's what calms them down. And that's why, again, it's need to be relatively robust. We need to have someone in the loop, like a clinician, that can assess what is right for that patient at that specific time. And by the way, it could be even in different times, time stamp with the same patient in different environment makes the right effect. So again, it's again long answer, but it's a lot more complex.
Awesome, thank you. Samuel has some more great questions, but let me take some other questions from everybody else first, and I'll get back to that. Lauren is asking, the moves of the patient must be controlled by a physio, at least for the first time, isn't it? And I think you already touched upon that.
Yeah.
And great presentation, Eran. Where can we find these scientific papers about XR.Health?
So first of all, we just published another one today, and we need to do a better job putting all of them in one place on our website, which it's on me. I don't need to do that. But again, I think you can, first of all, in different types of Google search, you'll find all the papers, the one that we published. And again, in the next probably few months, we're expecting additional ones to come out. We're trying to publish now one every month, basically. And it's a combination of real world evidence from our clinic and the clinical trials that we are conducting with multiple healthcare facilities in the US, in Australia, and in Israel.
Mm-hmm. And there's a research tab on your website.
Yeah, but I'm not sure it's like I'm not sure it's up to date with only ours. I think what we plugged in there was a lot of different papers showing how effective it is. And again, I just want to emphasize, I think it's not that we are claiming that, our content is the one that is making the difference or is so unique. I think there's a philosophical debate now in the industry. What's making the effect? Is it the VR technology? It's the immersiveness that is making the effect, or it's a specific content, right, that's make the effect? I have to tell you that I'm more leaning to the fact that it's not a specific content that is superior to anything else. It's actually the modality of care and how do you actually utilize it. But that remains to be seen. I think what it is clear that it's effective. There are more than 1,000 papers published already in different scenarios, different content, different healthcare facilities, different physicians, different patients, different use cases. Amazing results across the board. And again, for us at least, the main question is then, even though again we're spending a lot of money and time to make sure that our publications are out there, I think actually now that this is not the main challenge for the industry.
Thank you. Maria asks, how do you recruit providers for your referral network or virtual clinics?
So that's a great question there. So again, there are two different types of relationships, let's call it this way, on the clinical side. So first, if she's asking about how we are convincing physician to refer patient to us, that's where the outcome play a major role, right? We need to educate physicians that this modality of care makes sense because they've been referring to physical therapists, brick and mortar clinic for the last 200 years. And now we need to convince that physician that for the patient, it makes sense to use VR. I want to give you one example, okay? One of the biggest hospitals, so we treated a Parkinson's patient, by the way, and that Parkinson's patient had very, very good results. And then that specific patient went back to his neurologist here in Boston in one of the biggest hospitals and explained that they just did a VR treatment in from the comfort of their home. And that neurologist picked up the phone and called us and was like, what are you guys are all about? Like, I had never heard about VR for Parkinson's patient. So we gave him the pitch, we showed them the clinical data, we showed them the patient testimonials and all that, and said, you know what, I'll refer to you 2 patients. He referred 2 patients, and those 2 patients went back to him and said the same thing. And said, you know what, I want to introduce you to my colleague, introduce us to another neurologist, did the same thing. Then they introduced us to the entire neurology department that are now referring patients to us on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. But this is an example of how we have to work bottom up in order to create trust and make sure that the industry knows about us, like the traditional industry, I mean. Mm-hmm. But that's exactly the type of thing that we are trying to do.
Okay. So thank you for that. There are 2 related questions, I think. One is that how does it work if a clinic wants to use the system in their environment? Do you provide the headset? Do they pay for getting trained? How do you charge them? By license, by patient, or per the hour? And then the second question, kind of similar to that, is that how are the providers, clinicians managing the telehealth trained in person by organization or via a VR kit?
So one of I'll take a step back. The reason why we launch our own clinics is because we found that a lot of brick and mortar clinicians finding it very hard to change workflows. And to incorporate VR in a good way, you have to be all in. If it's like another sidekick, and then the VR is not making a big of a difference. And in order to enable that, when we are partnering with clinics and hospitals, we understand that, again, go back to the non-sexy stuff. We understand that we need to take care of their logistics and their tech support and the onboarding of the patient, give them clear billing guidelines, how to commercialize the technology so it will actually make sense for them, give them protocols, educate them, train them. So we are offering all of that as part of the first part of the service. It's a monthly subscription per headset. We try to simplify that to the best of our ability. But at the end of the day, we need believers on the other side that believe this technology can be impactful. And again, if the clinician thinks this is another device, then it usually doesn't work. Usually they put it in the shelf or in their closet or whatever, and then they forgot about it, and then it's done. If you want to really to be successful with this technology, you need to commit and you need to believe. And once you see the results afterward, that's easy to, to stay there. But you need to have a commitment, no matter what. If it's like if you want to use this technology.
Okay. Mike is adding on to that conversation, saying, what is your plan for educating physicians at real scale to expand treatment opportunity? Bottom-up seems like a big challenge for smaller companies. Pharma has years of experience and $1 billion aimed at this kind of education, but VR companies don't have the funds to educate at scale. Seems like the lone pole in the tent.
First of all, that's a very good question. And I think that disruptive technologies always start small, and it's always a long process until you can, create a big impact. And I think one of the problems in the VR industry is that there's like for the last 7 years that I've been in the industry, every year I'm hearing next year VR will replace smartphone. Every year, it's like for 7 years. And then people are surprised it's not happening. It's like, this is not how disruptive technology, or even the smartphone or the electric cars or any disruptive technology, it takes roughly 2 decades until it will actually hit mass market. It will take 2 decades. That's what it will take. And then people don't need to be, surprised that it takes time. Now, how startup can maintain that and make sure they're still in the game, I think that's exactly the challenge of every startup that is playing in the VR AR arena. And I think current economic climate makes our life harder for all of us because investors are less enthusiastic to invest in those type of technologies. So I don't have like an easy solution. If I had, my life would be easier. But I think that if you are a believer in technology, in this technology, and how it can be effective, you need to embrace the long journey, and you need to understand that that's like that's how disruptive technology evolution looks like.
So there's a comment and question. Thank you so much for this talk. I definitely agree that the economic buyer of VR is often different than user, like the patient. Would you be able to comment on what metrics, for example, cost or impact, and extent of impact to convince the economic buyer, such as hospitals, insurances, etc.?
So, and again, to go back and maybe to go back to the headline of this conversation webinar, you need to win in 4 fronts in order to have a relevant business in order to commercialize VR and AR. Okay, you need the regulatory approvals or certification. And just to open one comment about regulation, it's usually tied to what you want to claim. If you want to claim you are curing cancer, you need to go and show that you are curing cancer, right? The same goes for VR. You need to decide what you want to claim, and then based on that, make sure that you are aligned with the regulatory guidelines. But you need to clear that, right? You need to decide what you want to claim, and then you need to clear that and make sure that you are operating by the guidelines. By the way, I think one of our problems as an industry, there are too many players that are not operating by the guidelines, and then it's very hard for a consumer or a customer to understand what's the difference. But that's a different topic. But that's only stage one. Stage two, you need to find a business model that makes sense for your customer, for you. You need to understand who's paying at the end of the day and why should they pay. That's a very complex question. Then you need the physician to actually say, this is relevant for you, right? And recommend this technology. And then you need the actual user to use it. Otherwise, it doesn't make any difference, right? Each and every one of those steps are highly complicated. And what you need to do when you're structuring that, process is to make sure, you have everything, or at least you have dollar signs next to each and every one of those. Because if you have amazing technology, mind-blowing technology, but you'll try to sell it to a hospital, but you cannot show the hospital that how they are generating revenue from your product, even as sad as it is, that's the reality. You won't be able to sell your product. Now, outcomes are an important part in the process, but they're not enough. Outcomes have to be translated to dollars. And if you cannot take the clinical trial and then understand who's the customer and what is the revenue that they can generate, if you're saving money to the hospital, saving money to the insurance company, saving something that makes that worth money to the end user, then nothing would help. So you have to, when you're developing a product in the healthcare arena, I think, by the way, not in all arenas, but in healthcare, people get confused sometimes. It's still the case. You have to have a solid business, or all the other stuff are less relevant. On the business settings, I'm not talking about the research, right, which is a completely different animal.
Okay, thank you. So how do you overcome these difficulties to enter the market? And then Chelsea also has something similar, saying that what recommendations would you give to start marketing virtual reality software? What would be the first steps?
So I think, again, first you need to, if you're an entrepreneur on this call in VR in healthcare, I would map out those 4 stages. As I mentioned, it's like, okay, regulatory, do I need it or not? Now, and if not, that, that's a different market. That's okay. There are a lot of companies doing an amazing job on the wellness side, and that usually affect the distribution channel and your business economics, right? That's like a different market. I'm not talking even about this market, right? I'm talking about the healthcare regulated type of market. So first you need to decide again, what is my claim? And then how much will it cost me to prove the claim is correct under the regulatory guidelines? And then only after that, you can say, okay, what are the distribution channels? Assuming I was able to achieve that, okay, what's next? Who's my customer? How do I go to market? What are the channels? How do I, get some traffic? How do I prove to that customer that this actually makes sense? And after that, you need to go and, again, measure the compliance, adherence, and all the other elements. And unfortunately, and I think that's why healthcare is such a hard business for a startup, you cannot skip stages. You can assume that you might, but usually you'll crash and burn. And then you won't understand why you cannot scale the business, because the healthcare ecosystem is a very structured type of business. It's very hard for startup digital health companies. It's so fragmented, and I'm not trying to discourage anyone. I think everyone that are in this arena need to understand that the battlefield in healthcare for small companies is very complex. It costs a lot of money. It takes a lot of time. But if you're able to unlock it, it's still the biggest market, in the US or in the world. But it takes time. And again, if you would ask me 7 years ago, it will take us 7 years to get to where we are. Like, I would probably, think twice before. But it's important to understand that this is the time frame. This is not like unique. There's no, I open a Facebook app and everyone are downloading it and everyone are happy. And this is not the type of business that we are in healthcare.
Okay. Thank you. Maria is saying that ROI is a huge barrier for scientists trying to translate research into commercial products. Do you have recommendations on resources to help assign financial value to the ROI?
So I think, first of all, the first thing is to say, I want to measure ROI. A lot of people are not even getting to that stage, right? They're doing like publishing papers and then say, okay, but if in most of the papers that you'll read and most of the papers that are being published, they're not even mentioning anything about ROI. It's just because most of them are coming from the academy, right? And in academy and research, the research is what's important. But again, the first thing is, let's understand who can benefit from the outcome that we would just been able to prove. Mm-hmm. And I think that's stage number one. Even by doing that, as a researcher, you are like, 90% better than most of the researchers out there, if that's what you care about, right? And then the second question is, do we have a solid ROI claim? I think one of the things that struck me the most, when I started, again, and I'm not originally from the healthcare arena, right? So it's for good or for bad, I'm looking at things from a different lens. There is very robust and criticized way to criticize outcome, right? There's like in order to publish a paper that you believe that you were able to prove, they're like peer reviewed, and there's a very robust system that you need to prove that what you're saying is correct. But none of it exists in the ROI. It's like few companies can come and do like an analysis, but there's not really robust, system that can actually verify that what you're saying is correct, the ROI element, right? And then the way to do that is basically you can come up with different types of tools, and then you need to go and pitch to the customer. And he's the one deciding at the end of the day if your analysis is correct or not. If it could be an insurance company, it could be health plan, it could be whoever you wanted to pitch to. But then it's now becoming a marketing sales challenge, not just a scientific type of challenge, right? So again, to answer the question, I would start with, okay, let's try to validate ROI and then try to identify who is the customer, who is benefiting the dollar sign that comes out of this paper. And then that's a different challenge, how to get to those customers, how to pitch them to a point that it would make sense for them to adopt your technology.
Thank you. Samuel has a question about the headsets. He's wondering why you decide to ship the telehealth headset instead of relying on the commercially available headsets.
So we struggled with that a lot. And we are still, by the way, debating between ourselves what is the better way. Our patients are signing up for VR treatments. They don't care about 𝗘𝗘𝗦𝗧𝗢𝗥 in Oculus store. It's like they don't even know what to do with it. And they're not getting into VR because of VR. They're getting into VR because they believe this solution can help them. And it's a very different type of users, right? And currently, it's not like the mobile phone, everyone have VR headset back home, right? The people that bought VR, most of them, probably 95% of them are gamers. And most of them don't have chronic condition with multiple conditions that they want to treat, right? Most of them, again, we do have people that are close reference, but we weren't successful, at least in providing the high value clinician on the one side and using the existing fleet that is out there. But it could be that we've made mistakes along the way. I'll just say that again, patients that are signing up today, it's irrelevant to go and tell them, go and buy a headset at Best Buy and call me after you set up the headset that was designed for gamers. It's irrelevant, right? They need a solution, and our job is to provide them with a solution. I'm very hopeful that within, I don't know, the next 2, 3, 5 years, everyone will have a headset back home, and then it will be as easy as downloading an app. But unfortunately, the market is not even close to be that status.
Thank you. I think we answered pretty much all the questions. I'm going to take one more question from Daniel, who's saying, do you have programs for amputees? And I'm wondering, it's coming from the pain management, like phantom limb syndrome point of view, but I'll let you.
So the answer is no, but I have no doubt that it could be very, very powerful tool for those patients. But again, the blessing and the curse, as I mentioned previously, endless possibilities. There is not a single healthcare use case that I cannot think about a VR application that can be beneficial for the patient. It's just a matter of resources, time, and how to incorporate those in a relevant, package and business model.
Well, there's just one more question came in, and I think we have a couple more minutes, so I'm gonna read that too, and then hand it over to Steve. But Mike said, good answer in response to the long game for disruption. Thank you. What have you seen regarding differences between traditional healthcare investors versus relatively new healthcare investors jumping into healthcare for the first time in their willingness to play the long game with you?
I'm assuming he's also referring to the Amazon, the Walmart, and also there's like the healthcare market is evolving. And I'll give you an example. I attended a panel at Harvard Business School like 2 years ago. And before my panel, the previous United Healthcare CEO gave his speech and about how United are, looking at the healthcare market in the next 5 to 10 years. And one of the MBA students asked the CEO, aren't you afraid that, like, it was when Amazon just started the Haven, their partnership with, I think, 𝗬𝗘𝗦𝗖𝗥𝗑𝗑𝗥, they spent like $2 billion of establishing that unit. So it was back at those days. And one of the MBA students asked United CEO, aren't you afraid that Amazon will come and disrupt your entire business? Like with this Haven and 𝗬𝗘𝗦𝗧𝗏, and they know how to do consumer. And then the CEO replied, healthcare in the US is a wicked problem. It's like, it's so complex, so fragmented. You cannot just, snap your fingers and say, we'll get better customer service and we're good. Delight the patient and we're good. And all the MBA Harvard students were like, this guy doesn't know what's coming for him, right? And 2 years after, Amazon shut down the Haven, shut down their Amazon Care, bought now One Medical, right? And for me, that was like an example of everything is complex in healthcare. Everything is complex. Everything will take time. There are so many players in the ecosystem that affects, like, your customer is not the one paying you. The one that is paying you have different incentive than the one giving the service. The one that giving the service have different issues that are not related. And in that arena, you have device manufacturers and drug companies, and it's very, very complex system, right? And with different incentives, different people trying to figure out what their incentive, and at the end of the day, you have a patient that just all they want is to get a better care. I do believe that the new players that will come in will, without a doubt, improve processes. Without a doubt, we'll see improvements. But like I said previously, it won't be something that is quick, that will see an immediate impact. It's hard, even for those players, and it doesn't matter how much money they have in the bank. It's just the fact that the system is so fragmented, so complex. Again, patients have different types of expectations. So without a doubt, so the short, just a summary, it will make a lot of good, but it will take time.
Thank you. Thank you so much for answering all the questions. Thanks to everyone for all these great questions as well. I don't know if you want to add anything that you haven't talked about, you wanted to mention.
So I'll just say that, all the people that are now listening, you guys are pioneers. And I won't be able to convince anyone, by myself that this technology makes a difference. And the reason, I think the fact that you are on this call, you're part of a group, all of us. We're trying to push forward an industry together, and it will take time, but the only way to succeed is to work together. And we are trying as a company to share as much knowledge as we can with other peers, with other companies, to collaborate with anyone we can. And I just want to encourage you to work together with one another and to spread the word, because only together we'll be able to provide better care to patients using this technology.
Thank you. Steve, I'll leave it to you.
Wonderful. That was a fantastic talk and a very enlivening Q&A session. Super interesting and tremendously useful in that, Eran, you were able to share your innovator's experience, and it will make it easier for some other soul who is building a prototype, trying to get the attention of clinicians and patients and regulators. So I think this is incredibly valuable, and we really thrive on open innovation in this area. So, Eran, thank you. In fact, this talk should be curriculum. No doubt about it. For people setting out. And Tumay, thank you for joining us and moderating. Tumay's been involved with 𝗦𝗣𝗘𝗥 for the last couple of years, which we really appreciate. To the folks attending, thank you for attending. I'll call your attention to go to our website, 𝗦𝗣𝗘𝗦𝗘𝗥, to take a look at the upcoming talks and the historical talks. This talk will be posted there, so if so you can tell your friends and they can come and learn. But at the same time, there are talks that represent the innovation of the whole spectrum across healthcare, ranging from augmented reality surgery to mental health. So it's worth taking a look at, and by many people who have accomplished quite a bit in their careers. So it's worth taking a look at. So on that note, on exactly the hour, which is perfect, we're going to say goodbye and look forward to seeing you later on in the month. Take care.